Hey, what's going on, everyone? This is Mitch. Good Saturday morning to you all. I hope you guys are doing well out there and certainly having a fantastic start to your day and your weekend. I got you an update on Major Hurricane Lee, and we also will discuss what's going to happen weather-wise for today for your Saturday. We'll do that in the second half of the video, and we will discuss Major Hurricane Lee in the first half. We'll talk about how he's doing this morning, what he looks like, the latest information from the National Hurricane Center. We'll talk about the data that we're getting from the hurricane hunters that are actually flying through the storm right now. They've already passed through the center one time, about to pass through it again. We'll go over that information. We'll talk about the model guidance that we have, the latest information from that. And then we'll talk about the steering currents, because obviously a lot of people want to know where Lee is going. There's a lot of crazy, unnecessary hype out there as far as creating fear, saying it's going to go right into the U.S. The confidence is pretty low on that. I'll go on and say that right off the dot. But I know I've seen many comments say never, Mitch. And trust me, I understand that. I understand everybody's gut feelings and things like that. But we're here to, talk about what we do know and go off the facts that we know as of now. And that's exactly what we will do in this video and try to help you guys get an understanding of what steers these tropical systems. With that being said, thank y'all for the amazing support over the last really 2 weeks, especially, if you've been tuning in the entire summer. Summer's always a low point on my channel. Typically the weather calms down. There's not a whole lot to discuss. This summer has been totally different, and it's led right into hurricane season, which has been pretty active so far. So thank y'all for the amazing support. Thank you for supporting me and my passion of the weather. If you folks have not subscribed, certainly consider doing that. Like the video if you like it. And if you guys got anything that I can pray about or pray over, as always, please put it in the comments below so I can pray over it, and I promise you others will do so too. Let's get rolling. So we got Lee on your screen right here, and then we got Margot. Margot is actually getting whiplash from basically this outflow being caused by Lee. We won't discuss much on Margot, but Margot is forecast to strengthen. The next named storm is the end name, which is Nigel. It's funny because my boss's name is Nigel, and we've been talking about, is Nigel going to be a depression or a major hurricane or neither? So, I've been making fun of my boss at work, how it's going to be wild when we're going to be discussing a tropical system named Nigel and his name being Nigel. But anyways, enough of that. We have what is still Major Hurricane Lee. It's a 115 mile per hour storm. But man, Lee is really lost a lot of steam over the last 36 hours. This thing was looking like just a bulldozer of a storm. It was a category 5. When was that? Thursday evening. It had a pronounced eye, but it is still struggling with shear, and I think the shear will be around throughout the rest of the day. So I don't think we'll have a ton of weakening or a ton of strengthening. In fact, I don't think we'll have any strengthening because it's still dealing with that mid-level shear, and it's really chopping off its convection. In fact, this morning, the convection's really dropped off in the last couple frames here. So as of now, it is a low-end category 3, still technically a major hurricane, and it's not doing that well. Another way to look at this is we can zoom into this. There's an issue with tropical tidbits where there's a weird glitch in the run. So I didn't want to blind you guys with this glitch that was showing up. So I jumped on Weather Nerds. It's a great free site too, and it's available to the public. But another way to look at this, a little bit closer, Leeward Islands here, Puerto Rico, Dominican Republic. And you can tell there's no pronounced eye with this storm. You can barely tell what the center of circulation is, that low-level circulation. You can tell it's right into here. But this is just not really a healthy major hurricane. Remember, a major hurricane is considered a category 3 or higher. It's struggling with shear. If you don't know what shear is, it's basically the change of direction and speed with height, whether you have directional shear, speed shear. And basically what this does is these tropical systems, and it causes them to become basically tilted. And for a tropical system to be very healthy, you need a vertically stacked tropical system, which means you have mid-level convection over the low-level circulation, which means you have a healthy system. And typically we start to see that cleared out eye. We do not see that this morning. In fact, in the very last little frame, it looks even more unhealthy than it did a couple hours ago, or even an hour or two ago. So another way to look at this, and I love looking at this, and there's that weird glitch that I'm talking about. You see how it kind of does that weird thing. Hopefully that's not bothering your eyes. But the sun is coming up on Margot and Lee. Lee still has an excellent outflow. Okay, but Lee is still getting hit by the shear, westerly shear from from the west. So this is affecting the west side of the storm pretty good. I mean, it still is a nice structured hurricane, but it like I said, you don't have that cleared out eye, and it does look like Lee is really expanding somewhat. Okay, so that's something we need to watch for, but still a powerful hurricane. And the real question is, in the short term, short to medium term, as it enters the Atlantic, is this thing going to become a major hurricane? I'm sorry, a Category 5 hurricane. It is forecast to become a Category 4 hurricane, but is it going to reach that Category 5 status again? We're not quite sure, but I'll talk about why it could here in a second. Lee, as of now, the latest update, okay, and we'll try to see if we can get another update here. Latest information from 7:20 a.m. This is a 963 millibar low pressure storm, but the hurricane hunters that are flying through this right now actually found lower pressure. So it's very interesting considering the fact of how this actually looks, which looks weaker than it did, a couple hours ago. It looks weaker, but that doesn't mean that doesn't indicate what's going on under the hood of Lee, right? So this is moving west-northwest at 12 miles per hour. It's a 115 mile per hour storm. And another way to look at this is the cone of uncertainty. And now we have that full-fledged northern turn showing up on the cone. This goes out till 2 a.m. next Thursday. And you see you got the H where they're actually thinking this is going to weaken to a Category 2 hurricane on the next update or two, and then re-strengthen into a major hurricane eventually, maybe reaching Category 4 status. So that's interesting for sure. And if another way to look at this is zoom Earth. The sun's coming up on Lee. Lee's not bothering anybody right now, but is forecast to weaken into a 110 high-end Category 2 hurricane. It'll lose its major status and then potentially begin to re-strengthen tomorrow as it enters an environment with less shear. In fact, some would argue that the environment it's going to enter right into here, well north of Puerto Rico, is going to be its best environment that it's seen so far. So we saw what Lee did back here, right? When it intensified into a 165 mile per hour Category 5 hurricane. It went from a Category 1 hurricane to a Category 5 hurricane in like 12 hours, right? So this thing's already, a sustained hurricane. I mean, I do think there is a chance this could get back to Category 5 status. But just because it's a Category 5 hurricane, that don't mean it's going to bother anybody. It's just going to be something to look at, really. So right now, the peak intensity has dropped to 140 miles per hour, which is a major Category 4 hurricane. Latest information from the hurricane hunters. They're flying through this right now. They've already made one pass, and I'm wondering if they are heading back or if they're going to try to pass through this one more time. But it is kind of weird that they didn't hook right in here and go back into this. Typically, they do kind of an X figure. But they have found a new central low pressure of 956, all right, which is lower than the last update of 963. We know that the lower the millibars, the stronger the storm. So this would indicate that Lee's a little bit stronger than the last update. So we'll see what they do with the latest information. I think they'll probably drop new information around 11 a.m. So we'll see what happens, but the pressure is lower on the last pass. Okay, we'll see if they'll pass through it one more time, but it looks like they're heading on back to base. Let's take a look at the Euro. We'll take a look at the GFS, and I want you guys to know right off the dot, the Euro has an incredibly bad weak bias that I think they really need to do better in correcting, but of course, that's not my job to do. I know it's easier said than done, but hopefully they put a little bit more time and effort into the weak bias that the European does have with basically low pressure in general, but it's initializing too weak at 982 millibar low pressure. Okay, but what we will see here, and as this gets into Monday morning, September the 11th, is this number does begin to drop, which indicates an environment right into here, okay, that does support re-strengthening. Okay, the Euro gets it all the way back down to almost a 945 millibar hurricane, which is definitely a lot weaker when you compare this Euro model with the Euro model yesterday. But it still shows what we're talking about how it's going to eventually move west-northwest, and I think it'll move due west for a while. And I think this is going to freak everybody out in the Bahamas and the Southeast, thinking, why is this moving west? It wasn't forecast to do so. It is forecast to do so, and I'll talk about why here in a second. So if we get into Tuesday, Wednesday of next week, and this thing starts to jog, just due west, don't freak out. We were kind of expecting this. But sometime next Wednesday, this will make a turn north. All right, so it's a powerful hurricane. And then we get into next Friday morning, September the 15th, literally 6 days from now, we're still talking about Lee. This is heading north between Bermuda and definitely going to make a closer pass than Bermuda than, say, like the Outer Banks of North Carolina. We'll go on and switch up the coastline, up the eastern seaboard here. And here it is Friday morning. And it makes a pass that's far enough away from Bermuda on the latest Euro that really it doesn't bring any bad impacts or anything like that. But it does make that turn. It does make that turn east pretty quick. And if it was to make a turn east too fast, then it would be good and bad news. It would be good news for the U.S., bad news for Bermuda. Okay, but the latest Euro, guys, it's a swing right. This thing misses the U.S., it misses Nova Scotia. Now, if you were to look a little bit further up from my folks up in Newfoundland, because I know I have some people up in Canada that watch, and by the way, you folks in Canada are always so nice, always so kind, and I appreciate y'all. I don't think I've ever had a snarky comment from anybody from Canada. But it only goes out 240 hours out, and if you were to keep this going, I reckon that this would get pretty close to Newfoundland. Okay, but really the trend is that Lee is even going to slow down even more, which means we're going to be talking about him even more. But, you know, the latest Euro flat out misses Nova Scotia. But the GFS is definitely different. GFS, here it is, initializing way weaker than what it is. Okay, it does indicate strengthening as it gets right here in the Western Atlantic. Okay, so there it is. There's that little jog west sometime early next week. See how it's moving west? And you think, oh no, here it comes. But then it makes that turn north, finds that weakness in the pattern that we've been talking about nonstop over the last few videos, and then it's heading on north. So this is it Thursday morning, and you go on and move up. One reason why the GFS it does what I'm about to show you is because it's quicker, which means it gets out ahead of this trough that's digging into the eastern U.S. faster. Okay, the Euro is slower, therefore it gets influenced by the trough that comes in a heck of a lot more. All right, we'll talk about all of that here in a second. So we keep this going. We get into Friday morning, misses Bermuda, but unfortunately it heads almost due north at a time for a time period, and ultimately makes landfall in western Nova Scotia as a pretty strong hurricane sometime next Saturday, about a week from today. Okay, so you compare this with what the European is saying for this same time frame. The European for Saturday afternoon still has this thing way down here near Bermuda. So one is slower and one's a lot faster than the other. Okay, so that's pretty wild. So we look at the H-half, what is this? The H-half A model. Okay, it's initializing, I think, pretty well. So what does this do? Well, I think it's totally wrong already, because it really strengthens this over the next 12 to 18 hours. I don't think it's wrong about it strengthening this over the Western Atlantic, as I think it'll enter a much better environment. But I don't think it's going to really strengthen a ton over the next day. I could be wrong. I've been wrong about a couple things. In fact, a lot of us have been wrong because models did not handle the shear very well. In fact, it handled it so poorly that it even caught the National Hurricane Center off guard. Okay, so this is moving west, northwest, and then it makes that turn, and then, you know, it's getting kind of close to Bermuda. I would say, based off this run of the HAB model, this is following more so the European as far as the path of going out to sea. So we have to watch, okay? But we move into the steering currents. And one reason why it's moving west-northwest right now is because it's still being influenced by this orange area, which is a ridge of high pressure. Blues that you see on your screen is either low pressure, upper trough of low pressure, and just an upper trough, and just low pressure in general. It could be a cutoff low, upper level low, whatever it may be. Okay, the reason this jogs more so west than north initially is because this nose of this subtropical ridge is coming down on Lee. So that's why it's just continually moving kind of west. But I want you to watch as this orange area, the ridge of high pressure, kind of weakens. When it weakens, it sees a weakness right into here, okay? And that's when it begins to move north, okay? This high which has steering currents like this around it, is moving on away. Okay, and then you got a huge upper trough digging down, which, by the way, is going to bring fall-like weather to the eastern U.S. next week. And the steering currents around this is like that. Okay, and you think, oh no, it's going to slide in between this ridge and this trough, head right into Long Island or New York City. That's not the case. What you got to realize is, and I feel like I've deja vu by saying this over and over again, but you never know when we have new viewers or people just don't want to hear the information again. What you got to realize is this ridge of high pressure isn't going to stay in the same spot that it is next Wednesday morning. This upper trough is not going to stay in the same spot. This ridge could weaken. It could strengthen. It could reposition. It almost always will reposition. This upper trough that you see right here could weaken. It could strengthen. And it certainly is going to move one way or the other. And that's exactly what happens. And we keep this going here, and this begins to move north. It feels that weakness. But then look how this nose of this ridge stops kind of moving north and basically extends itself southwest. This influences the track of Lee because Lee cannot just take an easy escape out to sea because it cannot plow right into this ridge and not bother anybody. Okay? Instead, you got this current kind of going along like this. So Lee is going to fight for latitude. A stronger system is going to try to move north. Now, I've had some questions in the comments saying, well, wouldn't a weaker storm they're basically saying, wouldn't a weaker storm make it go more west? Well, you need a substantially weaker storm. I mean, just a tropical storm for it to really, really jog more west, because a weaker storm is influenced more by the flow aloft and lower levels of the atmosphere. A stronger system is influenced more by a flow aloft in the upper levels of the atmosphere. Okay, it's more sensitive aloft, therefore it gets pulled. That's why they just want to move north so bad. So they're going to try to round basically this ridge all day. Okay, so we get this off the screen and we keep moving. I hate how I have to always re-click it, but it is what it is. So you keep this going here, and this pesky ridge is still kind of nosing its way out at the same time. Even though you don't see blue in this area, they're still troughing in place. But one thing to note here is that favors the Euro is the fact that we have a weaker trough over here. This trough is so far away, it's not really influencing it. And in fact, it's probably helping to really kick this on out to sea. So one thing I'm noticing on the latest Euro is this pretty strong ridge right here moves on out the way. So therefore, this is going to push against this weaker ridging right here in the lighter shade of orange. That this area of ridging has nothing on a pretty strong tropical system. So you got two features right here. You got a high pressure moving out the way, and then you got an amplifying trough that was weakening, now re-amplifying and probably helping to move it out like this. You probably got a steering current around like that. So at the same time, this is not going to be a strong enough pull to pull this way. Okay, this is going to try to go this way. Okay, and as you have a weakening ridge. Now, if you notice here, let's get all this back off the screen here. Sorry about I'm always having to kind of double task there. But if you notice here, this ridge tries to build on top of it at the last second. And it tries to close this gap. But I think it's too late at this point. I think it's then found that weakness. Now, one would worry that this nose of this ridge that's building on top of this would really slowly down and try to push it a little bit more closer to Newfoundland if you were to keep this run going, because you got to remember the flow goes around this like this. Okay, but that doesn't mean this is going to abruptly turn right back into the U.S. This is fighting against this ridge, and it's going to try to find that weakness and still work against it, especially if this does not build right over this region really quickly. Okay, which I don't expect it to. I wouldn't expect it to if you kept the run going. So I hope that makes sense. Another way to look at this is the GFS, which kind of shows a different scenario, right? Shows the weakness, same scenario, same trough, same ridge. One thing I want you to notice is this ridge is really stout over the North Atlantic, as opposed to the European at the same time frame. It's very weak right here. There's an upper trough right here, kind of over just north of Newfoundland, and then on the GFS, There is no troughing right here. There's no weakening of the ridge. We have a stout ridge. Therefore, the strongest portion of this ridge is right over the North Atlantic. So this, even though it's a strong system, cannot plow into that. Okay, it's going to try to work against it, but this is why ultimately this kind of comes up and hits Nova Scotia. Okay. And we just are not quite sure on what the trough will look like at this time frame. We do know that there'll be enough for it to really boot this system out, which is good news for the U.S., but for Nova Scotia, Newfoundland, even Maine, we got to watch out for. Even Southeast Mass and, Southern New England still needs to watch out for this. But I think it really depends on what this ridge does right into here. If there's some kind of low up here, upper trough. So hopefully I explained that in a way where you guys can understand. It's a complex pattern in the long term of Lee for sure. So we take a look at the water vapor loop and what's going on for today, and we'll discuss the weather for today. I'm going to have to move through this very quickly here, guys, because I got a soccer game at 9 a.m. But we still got a stalled frontal boundary that's going to promote a ripe air mass for a lot of shower and storm activity. So we'll watch for that today. And you can see the more wider colors right in here indicating more moisture in the atmosphere. We got little plumes of showers and storms in these areas. And if you look at radar, you can see this waking up to some rain in the Dakotas, Nebraska, some rain, much needed rain down here in southeast Texas, and then some scattered and some other devout rain and storms across the eastern U.S. We look at the Storm Prediction Center today, just large marginal risk. No substantial risk of severe weather, but you do have a very low risk of severe weather where you basically have a chance of storms today. So just a level 1 out of 5 in these dark green areas. You could get some gusty winds, some small hail. You can't rule out a tornado either. Excessive rainfall outlook, you got the slight risk in the yellow, which means you have at least a 15% risk of flash flood guidance being met within 25 miles in any given location. We will watch out for this for sure. But I don't see a massive threat of flooding or anything like that. But there is that slight risk. So there's going to be some tropical downpours out there for sure. In fact, it's enough to where you have flood watches up for Charlotte, up to Greensboro, all the way up to Western Virginia and Southern West Virginia. So we do need to watch out for some flash flooding. We got these heat advisories in Central and Southern Texas, which is really nothing new, but not quite as hot as it was yesterday. I think I saw where it hit like 109, 110 in Dallas. But the humidity was low, thankfully, but 109, 110 degrees is hot either way. Take a look at what the HRRR model is saying for today. We'll get this southerly flow where these storms will move up from the south and move north through the Carolinas. We will get some storms in the Big Bend areas of Florida and some storms in South Florida today, but I think the widespread coverage will be into Georgia, the Carolinas, and up the southern and central apps today. And in fact, we'll get a closer look at this, really centering in on the Carolinas, Virginia, and all surrounding regions. And here they are. I think they'll get going late this morning and will become widespread. In the eastern Carolinas, they will move north and really, really become widespread into North Carolina, Virginia, West Virginia, eastern Kentucky, eastern Tennessee, Georgia. A lot of storm activity out here flying through. And just with the loss of daytime heating, I think that will diminish somewhat. But I still think we're getting around the midnight time frame and after. I still think we're dealing with some downpours, out here in the Carolinas and really anywhere. Okay, so today's one of those days where if you're planning activities around a football game, you got outdoor activities, don't look at your hourly forecast, guys. I'm telling you, find a reliable radar app and download it. And really, I would, it's not a knock on anybody, but just try to learn how to use it, know where you are on a map, and that's going to be the best way to gauge if it's going to rain soon or not. Rainfall today between now and the next 24 hours. A lot of rain can fall in North Carolina and South Carolina. Maybe 1 to 2 inches of rain in the western Piedmont, upstate of South Carolina. So some areas will certainly get a lot of rain today. We could get a good bit of rain up in West Virginia and Western Virginia. Anywhere from a ½ inch to 1 inch of rain in certain areas. The Northeast today, I think you'll get a wave of storms that ride up through Pennsylvania into the southern tier of New York State. Some storms are possible in Boston later this evening. And then I think even another round could possibly form and blast through Pennsylvania a little bit later today. I just don't think anybody's going to see, scary storms or anything like that. It's not going to be very bad, but it's going to be like some summer storms that fly through for sure. But some of these could produce gusty winds even tonight, later tonight in Vermont, southern Vermont, New Hampshire. But, this is, for example, this is 1 p.m., 2 p.m., 3 p.m., 4 p.m., 5 p.m., 6 p.m. And I do want to watch this area of storms in northern Pennsylvania later today, but some storms are possible. In West Virginia, we could get some storm action in the Delmarva area later this afternoon, for sure, in this evening. The south central U.S., I don't think the storms will be as widespread, but any storms that do form could be severe. We got to watch out for that. Some more showers could greet you guys in like central Kansas, southern Nebraska as we're waking up tomorrow morning. But we could get some storms in and around the Houston area that really gets going again off some leftover energy from this morning. But outside of that, even though we got a marginal risk into these areas where you don't see a drop of rain, there could be storms that are actually there this afternoon that isn't showing up on these short-range model guidance. Up here in the north central U.S., we're just going to deal with some showers in areas of the Dakotas and to central Minnesota. They will eventually drift into northern Wisconsin later this afternoon and this evening. And I think you'll be greeted to some light rain overnight in the UP of Michigan. Outside of that, some storm action is possible in Nebraska today. And then the western U.S., I do think we'll have some storms that ride this boundary of this ridge out here in the southwest. So central Nevada, north central areas of Utah, some showers and storms are possible. We could get some storms that form in eastern New Mexico later this afternoon and this evening too. Could have some storms that could be strong to severe in areas of northern and northeast Wyoming. And we'll have to watch. Some of these could really pack a punch in eastern Wyoming today. Outside of that, nothing else really to speak on, to be honest here. Temperatures, very pleasant in the Ohio Valley, early fall-like temperatures, 70s. But where this front just has not really went through, you got 80s, low 90s in the mid-Atlantic, rain, cool temperatures in the Carolinas. Warm in the deep south, but nothing too bad, really 80s, low 90s. Still warm in Texas, but nothing compared to yesterday. And the northern plains will be cool, but there will be a boundary somewhere in the central high plains where we'll go from like the 60s to the 80s for highs. And just typical kind of stuff out west. Nothing crazy, nothing unusual, really. Maybe a tick above average temperature-wise. Sorry I had to blast through the Saturday forecast that quick. I hate having to do that, but I'm in time restraints right now, and I got to jump off here. God bless all y'all. Have a great Saturday, and I'll talk to you soon.